Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third CSM-STAND Learning Agenda launch event. My name is Laura Adams, and I'm the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Director for CSM-STAND. I wanted to welcome all of you and to let you know that we do have Spanish, English, Spanish language interpretation. So you can choose that option by going down to the bottom of your screen, and there's a globe that says interpretation. Pick the channel that you want to listen to. The other thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to put up a poll, and we would like to get a sense of what kinds of interests our audience has in this event today. These are based on our learning agenda focus areas. We're wondering whether you're working on these things too. And then the last sort of logistical comment I wanted to make was that we plan to use the chat very actively. It'd be great if you go ahead and open that chat window and have it open, because we'd like to have a lot of exchange between the attendees of this webinar and sometimes even the participants. You can put questions in there. The chat will be moderated, and the chat moderator will put forward those questions to the panelists. But also just back and forth. If you have links you want to share, feel free. Or if you want to upvote somebody else's comment or question, feel free to do that too. Let's use the chat as a social space for interaction during the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now, and we can see what people are working on. This is great. We've got quite a lot of people working on our learning agenda focus areas, and welcome to those of you who are interested in learning more. So close that poll out, and we'll move on to our next section, which is introducing all of you to both CSM-STAND and to our learning agenda. And providing this introduction will be Masana Maluadze, who is our CSM-STAND Gender Advisor for the Africa and MENA Award. And she is also at one of our partner organizations in the CSM-STAND Consortium, Sonke Gender Justice. And she will be introducing us to CSM-STAND and the learning agenda in particular. So thank you, Masana.
Thanks, Laura, and thank you to everyone who's made time to be here today. It's a really exciting event for all of us who've been part of the consortium to bring together such a fantastic panel to reflect really on the new directions in which we need to move. So we can move to the next slide, where I can introduce the CSM-STAND project to everyone. So the goals of the CSM-STAND project, which is funded by USAID, is to foster independent civic forces, enhance civic engagement, and build vibrant, resilient, and self-reliant civil society and media sectors that cultivate more pluralistic and democratic societies. And you'll see there that CSM-STAND stands for Civil Society and Media, standing together to work to advance these goals and objectives. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. The CSM-STAND consortium broads a wide geographic range and reach. It is coordinated by a series of global and regional partners. As Laura mentioned, there are two legs to the partnerships. On the one hand, the global partners of the CSM-STAND consortium include PACT, IREX, the Aga Khan Foundation, ICNL, and the Asia Foundation. The project has as its specific regional priorities and objectives Africa and MENA, where we have the pleasure of having consortium partners, the Samir Kassir Foundation, and ANHRE, who focus on civic education, WAXI, AFRI Labs, and Sonke Gender Justice, who I represent today as well. On the Asia side, with the focus on Asia, Eastern Europe, and LAC, we have Foundation Gabo, the Makaia Institute, Forum Asia, Prague Civil Society Center,
para la filantropía de la comunidad.
Center. The project and consortium are also supported by a range of technical partners who provide information relevant to the work that we hope to undertake in collective and partnership with everyone here on this call, and particularly the consortium partners, who include Moonshot, who will be focusing on countering misinformation, TechSoup with their work on technology for civil society, Deflect, who focus on digital and information security, and Omdena, who focus on ethical artificial intelligence solutions and data innovation for civil society. So we can move to the next slide. What brings us here today? Why are we gathering to reflect on the CSM-STAND learning agenda? We really want this to be an iterative and co-owned process that is engaged not only by consortium partners, but by a broader spectrum of civil society actors across the world with specific engagement and interest in our selected thematic areas. The process of choosing the learning agenda was really developed in consultation with our consortium partners and their partners to identify core strategic priorities for our shared learning, not only for the direct purposes of the CSM-STAND consortium partners, but for edifying and growing the learning agenda of civil society, more broadly speaking, across the world, to be able to build democratic and inclusive societies. Our priorities have been identified as the safety and well-being of civil society actors and media actors, including interventions to improve digital, physical, and psychosocial safety, which fared quite strongly as a priority for partners and attendees to this call. So that's really exciting for us. We also identified networks and collective action and how to strengthen networks and diversify networks for enhanced collaboration across borders and boundaries. And then, of course, we identified information integrity and the trustworthiness of civic and media institutions, including countering disinformation and providing interventions to increase the independence, reliability, and capacity of civil society and media organizations to be able to put out accurate, relevant, and trustworthy information. We do this through an intersectional approach. Gender equality and social inclusion are at the heart of our learning agenda and our interventions. And so we've prioritized in our dimensions of civic space, foregrounding women and youth-led activities. We also want to be able to elevate and learn about what it means to encourage and foster mutual, individual, and collective safety and well-being amongst the CSM-STAND consortium, as well as providing information and reflecting on information integrity and trustworthiness. Networks and collective action are particularly important, as has been mentioned, and there's scope and opportunity to shape the rest of the learning agenda in consultation and conversation with the CSM-STAND consortium. So these are medium-term outcomes for norm and behavior change that we hope to facilitate and make real in this project, building on our collective contribution to sustainability and resilience for civil society and media institutions. I think the next slide, please. So what is our agenda today? We're going to have a 45-minute panel discussion focusing on the current learning activities in the different focus areas that have been identified. As has been mentioned by Laura, please do engage and participate through the chats with comments and questions, which will be tallied and shared with the panelists and the moderator. And then we also will end with some reflections and closing remarks from Lauren Kirby from USAID, who's representing us, representing USAID in this webinar today. And we'll then provide some next steps and feedback from you on how to take this work forward. Without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Laura Acosta, who is the media lead on the CSM-STAND project and representing IREX in the CSM-STAND consortium. Thank you, Laura. Over to you.
Thank you, Masana, and thank you, Laura, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for participating. It's super important for us to have this event, and we look forward to learning from the panelists, but also from your questions and the debate and the discussion that we might have. So my role is going to be to introduce our panelists and also moderate the conversation. So each panelist that I will introduce in a minute will have 5 minutes to make a first presentation around the area and the issues of learning and how they are working around that in their communities and their projects. Then we will move on to questions. So please do share your questions on the chat, Spanish, English, please do so. And Katie and I will be moderating the question section. And then we will have a wrap up and some remarks from our USAID colleagues that I will also introduce later on. So let me introduce our three panelists for today. We have Catalina Escobar, who is the co-founder and strategy director at CSM-STAND partner Makaia. Makaia is based in Colombia and strengthens capacities for social development through cooperation, technology, and innovation. Next, we will have Tara Sussman Peña, who is a colleague of mine. She's a senior technical expert at IREX. IREX is a global development and education organization that co-leads, as we said already, the CSM-STAND Consortium with PACT, together with PACT. And then we will have the pleasure to hear from Jelena Vichnik, who is the program director at BeFem, a feminist cultural center that promotes feminist politics, culture, and art, as well as empowering, motivating, and activating new generation of feminists and stimulating exchange and cooperation at local, regional, and international level. So we are going to start with Catalina. So Catalina, could you tell us a little bit about how Makaia and you in all your years of experience working in this sector are seeing the learning activities how are you thinking of your learning activities, and why is it important to reflect on those in the context of Colombia and Latin America really in general?
Thank you, Laura, and thanks everybody.
Muchísimas gracias, Laura, y gracias a todos por todos. Entonces voy a cambiar al idioma español.
This is a Latin American lounge. So for the translators, also to give them the heads up that I'm going to switch to Spanish. Muchas gracias.
And so thank you very much for everybody who is participating today. So in this learning agenda, which is being launched today, which will be very important for the knowledge of the civil society and the media, not only in the South America and the Caribbean, but in the whole world, because we will be talking about topics that have been defined as relevant for the civil society and the media. As you could see previously, it was really drafted in a very collaborative manner and taking into account the opinion of several organizations, and many of them are with us nowadays. And I would like to just focus in the first topic of the learning agenda, which is concerning the safety. Here in Makaia, Laura has presented us briefly, but we have a very important component concerning the digital transformation for the civil society and media. And precisely, we really identify ourselves with this point of the agenda concerning the digital safety in Makaia. Just for since a couple of years, have been doing some kind of analysis of digital transformators in the entities of the civil society. Maybe if I have time later, I will show you some kind of graphics that we have been analyzing. And for about 4 years, we developed and launched a diagnostic and a monitoring tool for the civil society organization, so they can analyze their level of digital safety and how they can develop this level of civil society. Obviously, there is a topic concerning the civil society, and this topic we have been analyzing. It's a topic that we are really interested in, not to say that we are worried about, because we see that there is a important vulnerability in the organizations of civil society concerning the digital risk, and particularly in the cyberspace. And apart from that, and all the things that we have been doing in digital transformation, we have been working with TechSoup. The part of the team of TechSoup is here if you have also questions concerning being a follow-up in the organization of civil society in topics of cybersecurity, because we have also been studying a lot these topics, and we have been aware on how important is in this topic of civil society that we can share with you later on. And we have been designing, as we told you, together with TechSoup, a follow-up process of organizations of civil society so they can increase their levels of safety at the civil society, and it's cybersecurity by means of technology tools that they can implement. But at the end, all of that converge and focus in the human beings and the people who are working in this civil society organization, and how we may be aware in the risks that we have when we just work in the cyberspace. I feel that they still have time to share with you two fast slides on the diagnosis of civil society. Yes, I think that we still have about 2 minutes. Perfect. So I will just share with you. Please forgive me, but I am here with 2 computers, and I am.
Está en inglés y en español.
It's 100% free. It's in English and Spanish. I'm going to show you the link in the chat. It's a tool we have here in Makaia. It has 31 questions divided into 5 knowledge areas. One is vision and strategy, organizational culture, operation, marketing and communications, and infrastructure. And through these 31 questions, when organizations respond all the questions, the organizations of civil society will be located automatically, because the tool locates them in this quadrant based on trend followers, nascent, digital, or conservative. And the interesting part of this tool is that it can be compared to other organizations which have done the same diagnosis, which at present is 300. And look at this menu on the left. This is a PowerPoint, but when you do it in live, you'll be able to compare with other organizations in your country, in your state, in your city, also per area of interest, such as education, culture, etc., and also type of organization. So look at this. This is our little point here, Makaia, and I can compare to all the other organizations who have done this diagnostics. And another thing I can do with this tool, which I said is 100% free, is that I can see my evolution as time goes by. For instance, this diagnostics of Makaia was carried out 2 years ago, and we implemented a working plan to enhance the digital transformation level. So the idea is to do the diagnostics once again this year, and we hope to be now towards the right and a little bit higher up, obviously. And another interesting aspect of digital security of this diagnostics. Oh, sorry, something I did wrong. It enables us to analyze in an anonymous way what is going on in the sector of civil society. As we're doing here, when we do double click, we look at digital security or digital safety, and we can see that some of the trends that are happening, and it's very interesting what we found out. Well, interesting, but also very challenging, because, for instance, on the left, this chart is what digital security policies have been implemented in each organization, and we found that only 12% of the organizations that have done this survey have defined secure and usually audited ways, and more than 30% do not have it defined, and more than 25% say that they are somewhat safe, and about 30% say that they're partially safe. So we have a major challenge and a major opportunity for this agenda and for this group and this consortium, which is to enhance, whether in 1 or 2 or 3 years we carry out this analysis once again, and we hope that this indicator on the extreme right will be much higher because it's very low right now, and the civil society organizations are extremely vulnerable to these digital security issues. And to conclude, we also analyzed the commonly used actions used by organizations in regards to digital security, and look, these are elemental stuff, like user and password for each computer, to have an antivirus, to have network and Wi-Fi protection. And when we get to deeper situations, this is not being used consistently or thoroughly enough or appropriately enough. We need other types of tools and protocols which are very important to protect ourselves and also to protect the information of civil society organizations and the media, who are the custodians of what is most important to us. And so with Laura, this concludes my presentation. Dago is here also from Texur. At some point in time, they can talk about specific actions to accompany civil society organizations in cybersecurity issues and what we have found. So right now in the chat, I'm going to give you the link to this tool. It's 100% free and it's available in English and Spanish. Thank you very much, Cata. Very informative, very interesting.
I would like us now to, I'm sure there are a lot of questions and we'll come back to those later on, but I would like to now reintroduce Tara Sussman-Peña, who works at IREX, and she will tell us a little bit more about similar tools that we have to assess the information and ecosystem. So Tara, please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Laura. And yes, this is sort of similar in a sense, but sort of a big picture system approach. I'm going to talk a little bit about IREX's Vibrant Information Barometer, which we call VIBE, which is a tool that we designed to capture, measure, and analyze the way that information is produced, spread, and used within a system today. So it's meant to give sort of a broader analysis of trends and give users the ability to track trends over time, as well as compare countries. And the idea of the VIBE measurement is based on this kind of ideal goal of achieving what we call a vibrant information system or ecosystem. And the vision for that is that people need to generate, access, engage with, and disseminate high quality news and information in order to make informed decisions, hold those in power accountable, and take actions that will improve their lives. We look at 4 different principles for this: information quality, multiple channels, how information flows, information consumption and engagement, and transformative action. And we can talk later about sort of what the methodology is if there's interest in that. So IREX has been working a long time, over 2 decades, on media strengthening and improving information environments. And we've, for a very long time, had this kind of a tool. We used to have something called the Media Sustainability Index, which looked more at the media sector. And VIBE was built to replace that and really do a more broad job of looking at how to diagnose the information, very complex information environments that we live in today, with the idea to use the learnings for donors and for implementers and local organizations to design and improve their programming. And we look at VIBE, we use it in 2 different ways. Before I talk about that, I just wanted to say that I was kind of reflecting about this conversation and about learning. It hadn't really struck me before, but it's very interesting to note that VIBE looks at the degree to which people, and you could say people, whether they're in communities, whether they're journalists, whether they're civil society, whether governments, people access, engage with, and learn from good quality information and use those learnings to inform their actions. That's actually sort of a big driver of how we look at the system. So it's quite appropriate really to the conversation that we're having today. So of course, that's the ideal. Many times people interpret things differently or don't learn, but in any case, that's kind of the framing that we're using. So whether people are using these learnings to take actions that are going to improve their lives. And we use VIBE in two different ways. The sort of original version was funded as a standalone project by USAID, as I mentioned, to replace our Media Sustainability Index. And it's currently it was in 13 countries in Eastern Europe, and this year we added the 5 countries of Central Asia. And it's done every year. And we have a dashboard that we can use to kind of track trends over time and kind of dive into the scores of individual countries. And I'll share that in a minute, as well as analytical reports that really go into quite a bit of depth on a country level. And I just wanted to share 2 examples of recent VIBE findings from across the countries, just so you can get a sense of what are we learning and how might it be used. One recent finding was about the need for media literacy education, that it was widespread across the region, and that current efforts are uneven and focused on schools. So one of the findings was that the need for adult media literacy was quite widespread across the region. And another very different type of finding, but actually very relevant to people's interests and to the previous panelists, was that it found a lack of financial and technical capacity prevents media outlets from investing in the digital security protocols that they actually already have. So you can get a sense that those are really quite concrete findings and could help when designing programming or thinking about what is the best type of thing to support. So that is one type of way in which we use VIBE. Another way is that we also use it in a much more localized way, a way that's really driven by local partners and focused on our localization strategy. And this way of using the tool is really quite adapted and adaptable. So I can give you a couple examples of that. One for a USAID funded project called Credible, which is in Guatemala, Peru, and the Dominican Republic. And the goal of this project is to transform the way that youth interact with their information environment and to help create resilience to disinformation and empower youth to engage in decision-making and fact-based discourse. So because this project has this very specific focus, the first 2 principles of VIBE around information quality and information, how information flows through multiple channels are really the most critical areas for learning. So those principles are the ones that our partners are collecting data on in order to design their implementation projects to adapt our learn to discern methodology for their context to help youth build resilience to manipulative information. So that's one example. Another example of sort of an adapted VIBE was for our Ukraine Unity project, where we created a youth version that looked at a lot of the questions, but from a youth perspective. So as opposed to having an adult expert panel, we had to modify the methodology so that the youth could provide input. And for Unity, had a really robust learning agenda, and VIBE was used to help define programming for youth to help build youth leadership towards a values-based Ukrainian identity. So it was kind of a broader goal. You can imagine that since the Russian invasion, Unity has pivoted and research has shifted a bit, but in any case, that was sort of how it all began. And we're also looking at a number of other individual country projects where we'll be embedding a localized adapted version of VIBE. So I guess I'll just end with one final sort of comment or observation, which is because VIBE is this sort of big systems measurement, measure systems change, it's really meant to be a tool for learning and for strategic decision-making and for design, and not as sort of to create indicators of any individual project. So I will, I'll drop some resources in the chat for our interactive dashboard and for our reports in case it's of interest to anybody, and I will end there.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you so much. It's interesting to see the system approach, and I'm sure we can then dig a little bit deeper with some questions. But I want to give enough time to Yelena to also share what they are doing from their end.
Okay, hello, thank you everybody. It's super to be here with you. So before I start with my short presentation, I will try to put it in 5 minutes. Before a few years ago, I wrote a small publication with my colleague Katarina Lončarević about feminist politics and solidarity. And then I asked one of the famous feminist and anti-militarist activists from Serbia, Staša Zajović, what is feminism for her? And then she said to me, it's always intervention in certain political and social context. And somehow it became methodological mantra for my work before any analysis or any interventions or feminist action. Me and my organizations really deconstruct all the concept of some context in some situation. So it's very important to know that feminist practices is not some kind of predefined pattern, but action in certain political contexts, and that action usually presenting different technologies of resistance to some governing structures of power which producing inequality. So about Serbian context, it's some kind of the environment of never-ending political tensions, deep socio-economical crisis, and creation new historical frameworks. And the issue of the position of women is being marginalized and positioned at very bottom of the priority list. We can actually talk about insufficiently fast changes of the position of women in the society, or about the loss of the privileged which is acquired earlier. So more than ever, similar in Serbia or on some kind of global context, we need a strong mobilization of the civil society, women's movement, LGBT groups, which will react, act, and be visible in public and media space. It's not some kind of new idea, because networking, connecting unity in the women's movement, it's in region or in Serbia and globally, but somehow it's again and again turns up to be revolutionary for every community, since it brings some kind of changes, whether slower and faster. Why? Because feminist action is always some kind of political act, as Judith Butler said, and the very possibility of such action is the first steps of the toward changes. So about my organization, we're a feminist cultural center, which was the result of cooperation between Swedish and Serbian and regional feminists, because the other co-founder of this organization is Kristina Washolm, Swedish journalist. And so since 2009, through different programs of media production and creating new media policies, educational programs, networking, and festival contents, we have been re-questioning and promoting feminist politics, culture, and art, as well as empowering the new generation of feminists and motivating and activating new feminists from the hood, and stimulating somehow exchange and cooperation at the local, regional, and international level. So one of our crucial idea is that we don't speak on behalf of other women, but we stand for creating free spaces for different female voices and different feminist politics. A key part of our work is building community among feminist activists on a local, international, and level, and we creating spaces for feminist knowledge building and sharing in order to somehow devise the joint agenda that would respond to the emergency issues in our shifting reality and hard historical times. For that reason, the space that BeFem opens is crucial for the cross movement and intergenerational collaborations that will keep a feminist movement more connected and responsive to the different constant shifts. Our leadership position and the network we built with both local, regional, international activists, media organizations, educational institutions, and civil societies somehow enable growth communities, young women, and minority groups. Strengthening and mobilizing the feminist movement and increasing the visibility of women and minorities in the public and media spaces have always been BeFem goals. From its very beginning, So another feminist definition of feminism, feminist politics has produced its various strategies in the process of and struggle for the emancipation of women, but also it's established a political model of social solidarity with the others who are also exposed to system oppression. That's the reason why we wanted to include different minorities and marginalized groups without building hierarchy between us, between our history, which is why our program includes women from various minority groups such as rural and small community women, women with disabilities, LGBT women, older women, Roma women, and so on. Our work is designed to demonstrate the obstacles that the under and misrepresentation of women and other marginalized groups in the public sphere and media pose in the terms of gender justice. So the question of who is excluded and who is not, and the different levels of inclusion and exclusion in media content can help us to understand the working of an oppressive system. Our evidence as organization and also research center shows that by excluding women's voices and those of a minority in general, a door is open to the identity-based violence and violence against women. However, building bridges between those who are managed and work in the public sphere and media, different institutions and civil society groups create opportunities to expand and understand of the importance of gender parity and creating a society of justice. The other important strategy of our work is having feminist knowledge and the history through media production and developing a new communication strategy. Our audience is changing, their demands are different, but we are still focusing on building our own media space as a tool of political instruments and influence. So I saw some question, but okay, I can check later. About networking, because it was the question for me, we were one of the initiators of the regional network of festivals and organizations working with the culture and the gender in different terms. It's so important to note that when we make collaboration with an organization from region, it's we say in the similar context and we have similar experience, so it's easier somehow to make agenda and to have a similar learning lessons learned from our past, so we can connect better and understand better each other. But from the other side, during the realization of our festival and different cultural program, an international network with a Swedish group such as the Bang Magazine, Malmo Feminist Networks, individual artists has been created. BeFem somehow, before 10 years ago, became an important actor, Belgrade, Serbia, regional, but also Swedish and international feminist scene. Our ambitious and fruitful work has made this festival and our programs one of the cultural institutions of the region. So my opinion and opinion of my colleagues that we produced different content, and it wasn't part of the dominant narrative, also a dominant narrative in feminist circles, and it was our potential, and it's certainly success to see the audience, our audience getting broader and more numerous every year, to see new faces, new spaces, and people who just discovering feminist politics and subversive strategies. And on the other hand, through the content we promote in the media, we emphasize over and over again the importance of having feminist knowledge and politics, which is somehow kind of resistance to the aggressive influence of gender mainstreaming and all its steps to institutionalization of feminist politics. For the end, we are working very intensively to strengthen connectivity at the local level. In the previous years, about 150 women from the local community, small villages, and about 50 women from urban communities participate in the programs and activities of our Summer Feminist Villages Summit. Also, it's important to say, as a methodology also, that cooperation doesn't happen only once a year, and that we cooperate with the women we meet in the meetings in various ways through our and their program through the year. In the long run, we want to multiply the work through other communities, and through this initiative, mapping needs of other women without any hierarchy. And the long-term goal is network made up with these networked actors and leaders of local communities in order to build democratic, equal, active communities together. So 5 minutes, I hope so. Thank you.
Wow, Yelena, it's great everything that you're doing, and I think what you are what you mentioned sparks or refers to one of the things that CSM-STAND reflect quite a bit, which is how to build effective coalitions and networks, and what does that mean in terms of the balance of power, but also in terms of the final outcome, right? So I would like to pose a question, and I see some questions in the chat that Katie might summarize in a bit, but I would like to pose a question for the three panelists and then open it up to other people's questions. Is like, how do you see the role of learning, of this type of learning that you, the three organizations are compiling and really moving forward? How do you see the role of learning in the effectiveness of building better coalitions to achieve social change, especially maybe in contexts that are more close than others, but more in general? Maybe Yelena, you want to start and then open it up to Catalina.
Okay, so our mission is to promote the politics of feminism, especially among younger women, by opening new spaces and bringing new voices. So for us, the lessons learned is to invest our energy and time and knowledge in a growing number of free of charge educational programs and trainings in spite of this neoliberal economical concept, so which will make it possible for women from minority groups and deprived girls to gain access to information and the new skills. And also for us, it's important to provide gender feminist educational and different media programs in formal and informal academical centers. Through our educational programs, women and girls from these minority groups get greater knowledge and sense of entitlement to their rights, and somehow the ability to empower other women and girls in realizing their rights in their small communities. Through our media productions, we make emancipation policies and work with girls and women from smaller communities, but also make a history of women more visible and somehow more available to a broader audience. In our work, a lot of institutions were closed for us from our feminist perspective, but then we decided, okay, it's time to open our space and create a free zone for a feminist thinker and for a younger generation to create new communication strategy but the crucial thing is to make women activism and women work visible for a wider audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yelena. And Catalina, how do you see this issue in the work that you do?
Laura, I think learning is fundamental to these topics that we manage. I think from, well, your question was also related to the coalitions, but I'm gonna first talk specifically about learning, because, well, we have realized in this process, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back to Spanish. So for the translators,
Daniel,
I'm gonna go back
now.
Nuevamente, como nuestra audiencia es latinoamericana.
Entonces, con esta, with this Latin American, with these events, sometimes we just forgot in which language we are talking. I ask you to forgive me. So Laura asked us about the role of the learning to just form coalitions and these kind of topics. And I would like to talk about the general learning through the digital and also cybersecurity and safety. So the topic of the learning is really essential, mainly in the topics of digital transformation. In order for digital transformation to work in a civil society organization, it needs to be a clear leadership, since the management of the organization to be able to perform digital transformation by means of the learning of the management of the organization, for them to understand the importance of the digital transformation, and particularly concerning the cybersecurity and so safety also. We are performing some kind of activities with the SUP and also using some Microsoft tools. We realize that learning is also important in the safety areas, because the main vulnerabilities of the digital safety come by means of the persons and not by means of the devices. We can have the best devices, the best tools, but if a person within our organization click in a link that's inappropriate, in an inappropriate email, then the vulnerability enters the organization. So the topic of the learning is really important, because at the end is the decisions of the human being which are making the destiny of the organization in these topics. And also to create coalitions is also essential, mainly when we are talking in new topics, when we are really working on new topics. The learning needs to be permanent, but particularly when we are dealing with a new topic which is unknown, when we are building this base knowledge about the topic, the coalitions and the collaborative work is essential in order to progress in a particular topic. And in this case, we are realized that to the extent that we can also work with other organizations, with other people, and be able to have a collaborative knowledge, we will be able to move forward in these types of topics and also protect our organizations and our data from the vulnerabilities that unfortunately became natural in the digital environment. Thank you, Catalina.
Say something about this question, and if not, we can move on to other questions in the chat.
Sure. I love the question, and I think it's really it's important and thought-provoking. And I was thinking about, there was a question earlier in the chat about I don't remember what the question was, but something about sort of hierarchies and in coalitions. And I think that's it's learning is sort of critically important when we think about how is it possible to do coalitions differently or even do partnerships differently, right? If we're working in global development where we have a very strong history and still some remaining structures of colonial powers and other types of unequal power. And I believe that, you know, this coalition, this group is working very hard on questions of how to share power and how to cede power. And I think that's impossible without having learning as a central part of the agenda, right? Without having a general stance of humility, of that, you know, all of us have something to learn and all of us have something to teach, and that it's in learning together and growing together that we can kind of better become a coalition. So maybe that's kind of a broad answer, but I think it's a critically important thing to think about.
Thank you, Dara. Didi, would you like to maybe pose one or maybe one question?
Yes, I think, so building off of what Tara was saying, and just to circle back, there is a question about how to support non-hierarchical coalitions and networks that work efficiently together. Although we did cover this a little bit, I think it would be interesting just to expand a bit more and sort of put it in practical terms for the participants. We can start there, and then I have many great questions, so.
Maybe Elena or Catalina, maybe.
About I'm sorry.
Yeah, how to support non-hierarchical or coalitions. What does that look like? That sharing of power.
I think it's not enough just to learning. It's important to listen to each other, to sharing our knowledge with our hierarchy, and to be conscious of your privileged in every moment of your work, to change the position of power in the inner structure of organizations, and first of all, to share same values and the same politics, and especially in this time of growing ultra-right ideology and anti-gender ideology globally. So we have to stick together and to be very conscious that right-wing groups can use our feminist methodology in work to put a similar question on their agenda and to mobilize bigger number of women and men. So we have to also re-questioning our politics almost every day, because feminism and feminist politics is a long-term process in our life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura, I would just, perdón, sorry, going back to Spanish. Diré algo.
So I will say something that's really essential on these topics. I think that in order not to have this feeling of hierarchy, I think that the coalition needs to be co-created in the beginning and also invite all of the people. So this way it can be feel like in a collaboration, that just like a hierarchy. And the other thing that I really was asking myself, and we also had some kind of chat in Makaia on this topic, even though a coalition or an ally could be co-creating and it may not have this hierarchy, it always will need leadership and moderation. And I am talking about moderation in the good sense of the topic. There needs to be somebody who would be leading and who would need to invite the members to participate. And I think that we need to think like from hierarchy to positive leadership. And I think that when there are process of co-creations in order for a joint construction, because when we build, when we construct, we can feel that we are part of that. When you are just asking somebody to just giving orders.
Definitely, those are things that we are in the CSM-STAND consortia also is a space where we navigate and how we would like to also make sure that this learning agenda is included in this type of consortia buildings. Yes, Yelena, sorry, you have your hand up.
I wrote one question or one comment about tiredness of women activism or burnout, and I really think it's very important to understand that feminism in Sweden and feminism in Ukraine in this moment, it's not same. So we really have to invest our energy and our knowledge in building bridges and building new generations. So I think maybe it's methodology for the future, because all of older and the middle-aged feminists are really tired of same circle and same questions and the same trouble in our society. So just that.
No, okay. Thank you for that. Super important.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question, Katie, if you want to bring one of the chat questions.
Sure. Mason posed a very relevant question about digital security and behavior change. He is interested in Makaia's, if Makaia's learning captures changes in behavior and attitude change. Does the learning points point to ways to encourage positive change in those areas?
Thank you, Mason. Switching back to Spanish. Esta pregunta sobre
so this question on the change of behaviors, I think this is the most important, because I was mentioning we can have the best tools, but if there are no change of behavior of people who just interact with the technology in a social organization, we will not be able to accomplish anything. In the process that we are doing with the team of TESUP, with the tools of Microsoft, because this has been a pilot, what we have been doing in the beginning is an analysis and also a questionnaire in the base level of the people in order to understand what kind of knowledge have the people on cybersecurity, on what does it mean, the phishing malware. So we do kind of a diagnosis on what kind of knowledge and how are they feeling, these people with defects, and if they really know about it. And really the follow-up process is directed towards people in order to be able to create cultural changes at the long term, because that's the only thing that can be sustainable for a process to be sustainable. If we concerning the digital safety in the social organizations, or of course the tools will be improved, but also training needs to be done to the team, and at the end, it's an analysis is performed on how the work team improve their capabilities and competencies in order to sustain those changes in the organizations. And nowadays, there are really interesting tools. For example, Microsoft has a tool that simulates a cyber attack in order to generate those kind of changes in the culture, so that all of the people who work in social organization, they have, like you say, so they have this chip incorporated on the security, and also to be this cultural change.
Sorry for the translators. I'll switch to English, it's easier. All these issues around learning and the purpose of learning, right? And how we actually learn from each other, and the effective methods that is not just the learning for the learning, but the learning for a behavior change, social change. It's definitely where I think this learning agenda should be focusing on. To really advance these issues and the learning around these issues in the community. So I want to thank the three panelists there. This is just the start. We are now going to be handing the microphone to our USAID colleagues, but we will then when in the wrap up, there will be some links and information on how we could still continue to engage with Catalina, Elena, and Tara to continue this conversation offline, of course. But now I want to turn over to our colleague at USAID El Salvador, Guillermo Miranda. He is a civic engagement and governance specialist at the mission there, and he will tell us a little bit about how you see these issues in the work that you do, and how this relates to the scope and mission of the USA mission in El Salvador.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you all. This conversation has been truly insightful and resonates with many of the challenges we have here in El Salvador. Just a couple of first comments. When it comes to digital security, the challenge is big, and not only because of that figure Catalina shared with us. I believe only 12% of organizations have defined, secure, used, and audited digital security policies. But also because, as Catalina said, in the end, it depends on human behavior. And, you know, here in El Salvador, many civil society and media organizations ask for cybersecurity support, but don't know what exactly that means. And this can be very problematic because they may think we can just put a robot that will protect them from threats. And cybersecurity requires change in habits. And therefore, individuals must be proactive in taking very concrete and sometimes, you know, complex actions. Regarding the VIBE tool, I think that reports are valuable, although sometimes they stress out things we already knew. But regarding VIBE, as Tara mentioned, I think illustrating how information flows is a clear added value and critical information nowadays. And Jelena, I think this was like someone talking from the future when you started to talk about all the things you are doing with feminist groups. I found it really interesting. She mentioned that intergenerational collaboration is key in terms of engaging with new audiences. And this really resonated with me. Again, in the case of El Salvador, there are really interesting intergenerational dynamics in different sectors in the country, but also in the diaspora, living in the US in particular. And well, the example of, you know, religion and politics is one. Something that is happening with our diaspora is that second generations are accessing information through different channels and probably are more aware about the democratic backsliding here than their parents. So they become influencers in their families about other narratives, and particularly the democratic narratives. So this intergenerational collaboration is key. Working with younger generations makes total sense because these emerging leaders are the ones who can organically navigate the digital landscape, right? And you know, this may be obvious to many people, but with very consolidated traditional organizations, this is quite a challenge. So I used to manage a project with a local organization, which is quite research oriented and focuses on democratic attitudes. They're pretty good at conducting surveys and analysis, but pretty bad at communicating their findings. And my message to them was always the following: selecting the executive director of your organization is as important as selecting the communications director or the communications team, or at least partnering with youth-led organizations and influencers to expand their audiences. And they know that. I'm pretty sure they understand that, but for different reasons, there is a big resistance to change. So again, the challenge is huge, and I'm happy we had this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guillermo. It's always great to hear your perspectives on these issues. So we have a couple of minutes left, and the closing remarks will be from Lauren Kirby, who is the Civil Society and Media Team Lead at the Center for Democracy, Human Rights and Governance at USAID, and also the Agreement Officer representative for the CSM-STAND. So Lauren.
Great, thank you so much, Laura, and all of the speakers today for really the opportunity to, as Elena put it, to learn and to listen, right? As we were hearing from all the great panelists. I really was thrilled to hear, the theme of safety and security coming out across a lot of different topics and organizations today, and really seeing that theme, not only at the organizational level, but also at the individual level, and including specifically across, diverse populations for that individual level. And as someone put it, for the user, because I think, when we're looking at this learning agenda, when we're looking at where we want it to go, we always want to have that user in the at the top of our mind there, the goal. How can we learn and grow so that we are enabling the user to, as someone put it, better understand from each other and to overall build this base of knowledge together and I really liked how Tara framed this, for that ultimate goal of making strategic decisions, having that decision-making power for civil society actors, for media actors, for advocacy groups and local partners, for change agents, wherever they may sit, because we as a donor and we hopefully together as a collective community can really rely on that learning to frame our positions, to frame our programs, to ultimately advance democratic governance and human rights issues. And we often are seeing that these issues are arising in the rapidly changing and fluctuating context that we've heard about here today across various continents of the world. And in that sense, we know, and at the heart really of the CSM-STAND award and therefore its learning agenda is this goal of being engaged and iterative learners, to actively be going through that process as we go and to hold ourselves to that standard of continuous adaptation. And this learning agenda, this launch is really the opportunity to help us continue to set that standard as an international community. And we see this, aligning not only with a lot of the core themes we heard today, but also many of USAID and the US government's key policy priorities at this point in time, from the highest levels of the national security strategy to the new presidential initiative for democratic renewal, which we announced at the Summit for Democracy last December. The same core themes are coming out as the learning agenda as not only relevant, but critical and essential to promoting that democratic resilience, particularly in the face of things like closing civic space, digital authoritarianism, and the corruption of information ecosystems. There are a number of key points of the new presidential initiative to mention, but here, just drawing on some of the themes today, I wanted to highlight our new Advancing Digital Democracy Initiative. This is really a whole of society approach to ensure technological innovation is not intrinsically at odds with democratic values or outcomes, but instead promoting and integrating those into technology and the design of technology itself, either for the government system or down to the end user as well. And we really look forward to seeing that initiative continuing to evolve alongside CSM-STAND activities, associated awards, and the learning agenda. Because for us, a core piece that is integrated across all of these is this theme of sharing power that we heard people mention today, right? This approach to locally led development that builds on years of investment and work from all of us collectively to really move localization to that devolution of more power and more leadership to local actors as a means to elevate diversity and equity in our partnerships, and as a means to also address our own constraints systemically and operationally within USAID. And one of the key points for the learning agenda that's so exciting for me is that we are centering this range of inclusive local voices as not only partners and actors, but as co-designers and executors of this agenda as we go. And by centering that pluralism and the principles of long-term sustainability and resilience into the learning agenda, we hope that it will be not only ours, but shared among everyone as a means to help advance our democracy promotion. And just to end, I think it's really important. I heard a couple of people talking about this idea of building bridges, this idea of preventing burnout, and I think Guillermo said it really well. We want to not only build these intergenerational bridges to combat burnout, which we know is a key issue for many people, but also to advance and embrace these change agents, these influencers, as he said, right across society. And so really just leave us all with that challenge to continue to build those intergenerational bridges together. And thank you all. Thanks to CSM-STAND for hosting, as always.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren, for your reflections. And also, Guillermo, I thought your sort of the things you picked out and the way that they relate to the context in El Salvador were really insightful and good to think with. I think the role of the diaspora and in many countries is an important force for democracy that we don't really understand or contend with sometimes. So I'm just going to wrap up. I wouldn't be a MEL specialist and monitoring, evaluation, learning specialist if I didn't ask for your feedback. So I'm going to launch a poll to see some of your feedback and responses to this session, and also just let you know that that we are going to hopefully we would like to continue to engage all of you in our learning agenda as it progresses. And there's I think somebody will put in the chat a link to our mailing list where you can sign up if you're not already signed up, and we will be sending out newsletters and inviting people to further events such as this one in the future. And I just want to thank all of our panelists for coming and sharing their in-depth experiences, and all of my colleagues for helping to facilitate this session. I think it went really, really well, and we covered a lot of very interesting topics and with a global focus. And I hope that our audience continues to join us on our global learning journey. And I will just quickly share the poll results and wish everyone a very good day wherever you may be. Thank you.